All right, welcome everybody to our Zoom family history call for April. We're going to be talking about using the U.S. Census for family history research. We're going to have a quick 10 or 15 minute slideshow talking a little bit about it. I'll show you a sample census record and what we can learn from it. This is a really high level overview of the census records. They contain a lot of information. And there's lots to find out and lots of ways to search it. So if you have questions, you can get in contact with us, give us an email or a call, and be happy to help you out. All right, so first, some quick facts about the census you may or may not know. So the censuses are mandated by the US Constitution. They happen every 10 years, and the first one was done in 1790. Now, up until 1850, they only track the names of heads of households. And so census before 1850 are not as useful as the later ones that have everybody's name on them. You can still find some good information in them, but it's a lot harder to know exactly who you're looking at. The 1890 census was lost in a fire in 1921, so you won't be able to find any information for the most part from that, which is a big tragedy. And by law, the individual data in the census is private and unable to be seen for 72 years. You can still see counts by county and things like that. You can't actually see individual data for 72 years. So the last census that we have available is from 1950. And if you're looking for the 1960 census, you'll have to wait till 2032.
Wow.
So it means I won't be able to find myself in a census for quite a while, for another 20 years or so. So the data that they gathered in the census, it's varied by year. There's quite a variety of information that they gathered, but usually it always includes the name, sex, the age, marital status, and then relationship to the head of the household. I recommend, if you want to see what exactly each year of the census contains, you can check on the internet, look in Wikipedia or something like that, and it'll tell you exactly what fields were gathered each census. Some are more useful than others, some are very useful, but each one's a little different. All right, some challenges in using the census is, although they try to get everybody in the census, it was a manual process and sometimes people are missed. I have run across relatives that I just cannot find anywhere in the census, even though I know they lived in the town at a certain point. So sometimes you may not have luck finding someone. You might also see duplicate entries as people moved around, either visiting relatives or staying in hotels. Sometimes they got put in the census multiple times. I've seen that as well. So you have to figure out which is the true, where they really lived during that time. Also, there's a lot of errors that can creep up in the census. Like I said, it was a manual process. So people went around and questioned people in the household or occasionally neighbors to try to find information about who lived in a certain house. And as they wrote that down, they kind of took that person's word for it. And sometimes because of either thick accents or just inability to understand what somebody was saying, some interesting names are written down in the census. So sometimes it's hard to track down a relative if they have a unique name. And so those census records were taken back to a central location and transcribed, and sometimes errors happened at that point as well. And even sometimes in the indexing, when people typed in the indexing for the census, they made mistakes. So you kind of have to work around those. Another thing I've found is a lot of times someone's name will change from one census to another. In one census, it'll be their first name. Next census will be their middle name that's written down. So maybe they call them different, or they use the nickname. Who knows? So you might think it's a different person, but I'd have to do a little more work to see if it's the same person or not. And then, of course, the dreaded 1890 census, where it was completely lost. So when you look at the 1900 census and you want to go back to see what happened, yeah, the earliest one before that is 20 years. So there's a big gap there. So sometimes you will miss information, but there's kind of ways to infer what happened during that time. And I'll show you in my sample one a little bit about that. Okay, so how to best search the census. So start with the indexes. They have pretty good indexes. Family Search has a great one. Ancestry has a great one. Um, you can search an individual census. You can just do a generic search on all census records. You can narrow it down by town, by state. You can do a lot of different things on there. And they're pretty good at bringing back data that's been indexed as correctly as they can. Also search for variations on names. A lot of times they wrote shorthand, like they'll put WM for William or SAML for Samuel. And those were transcribed exactly as they were written and usually indexed exactly the same way. So if you search William, you may not find it. Look for WM, it might come up. And then if you have trouble finding a family, but you're pretty sure you know where they live, depending on the size of the city, you can actually go in and browse the census pages directly. And I've done that a few times for relatives and found them in the census completely transcribed incorrectly, but I could tell it was them based on ages and things like that. And one of the most important things, nowadays people move all over the place, but in the past they didn't move very far from where they grew up. So if you can find a family that you're looking for in the census, it helps to look at neighbors either on that same page or the pages before or after that page in the census. You usually will find parents living nearby, either of spouses or the people you're looking for. You might find siblings and things like that. So there's a lot of information to be gleaned that way. And then you can compare census results one with another and compare children. That's how you can kind of tell if someone's really the same person, even though the name's different. You can look for gaps. Usually people had children at fairly regular intervals back then. So if there's a big gap, you might infer that there was a missing child or something like that. Either they died or moved away or something. So there's a lot to be found that way as well. So now I have a sample record that I brought up. So let me know, does that show up?
Yeah.
You see the record? Okay.
Yeah.
This is the 1910 census. It's a record for my great grandfather. He is up here, James Martin. So if you look at this census, this has his name. It has what the relationship to the head of household is. So he's the head. Has his sex, his race, his age at his last birthday, whether he's first marriage, second marriage, and how long they've been married. The nice thing about this census is for the women, if they've had children, it says how many children they've had and how many are living. I'll show you a little farther down why that's important. Most census records also include where this person was born and where their parents were born. So he was born in Missouri, as was his father, and his mom was born in Virginia. So you might be able to help track down parents based on where they were born. So looking at this information, so they lived in a little town in Missouri in Collins Township. And so I know they didn't move very far from each other down there. So if you look farther, just on this page, down toward the bottom here, you find a Samuel B. Martin as well, just a few houses down. And that's his brother. His brother, right, older than him, and that's his wife. So you can see as you search these census that the families can be close together. You'll be able to find more information about them. Another piece here that I want to point out, this isn't a family related to me, but you see how the wife here, it says she has 6 children, but 4 are living. So you can tell there's 2 children that have died at some point. So they may be on a previous census, or they may not be if they died in that 10-year space between census records. So you can see there is a lot of information on here. And some continue on to say what their languages, where they work, sometimes how much they make, whether they own their house, whether they're farmers, etc. So you can glean a lot of information from that. All right. And usually when they're looking at the census, they will put an X. You'll see this X here that says, who did they talk to? Who told this information about this family? So as you go through, you can look for that to kind of see if it was the wife or the husband or the neighbor or child that gave that information to them. All right, so this is Family Search. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see all the census pages laid out. There's 1,223 for Missouri. And you can just use these arrows here to go back to the page right before when you're searching for close families. So here's a William Martin. That's not great. Let's try that again. I love Family Search. That is, yeah, so that's the page before, and you can see there's a Joseph Martin and a William Martin, so that are also related to my great grandfather. So you can find relatives quite easily searching around the census like that. Let's go back here. All right, so any questions? I know it's a very high overview. There's a lot you can get out of there and a lot of depth you can go into. Any questions for us?
Yes, let me think for a minute, but I thought of
I just observed that it was really nice that those census reports were so legible.
Well, it's not always that case. This is kind of, you kind of be grateful for the people that have good handwriting as they transcribe these.
yeah. So the reason you knew that William and Samuel, Joseph were all related was because you had that information already.
I did. So I knew that was them because I already had that information that my mom
Yeah,
had.
but you could find then their family members.
Right, and their spouses and children.
That's right.
So
That's
if
right.
you didn't know, you only had that one person and you wanted to find their siblings or parents, those would be possibilities. You'd have to do more
That's
research.
right. Yeah,
Really
that's
were
right.
related because Martin's kind of a common name.
Yeah, and you could see that they were close in age, so they could be siblings that way.
Yep, and you could check where they're born if they're all born and the parents are born in the same places. Oh, it's a pretty good chance that it's a match.
Yeah.
And if you find an earlier census where those are all children of the parents, then that's another, especially if they're
That's
still
right,
in the
yeah.
area, that's another good way to tell.
Yeah, it's helpful to have you remind us that they lived close together and in those days, and so it's a possibility to look.
Yeah.
So I have the great grandfather way back, and my line stops with him, and he came over from Ireland, and I think that he was born in the 1700s, but I can't remember if he died in 1779 or if he was born then. I think he might have died. I was hoping to find something in a census for him.
Do you know where he lived?
He lived in Kentucky.
Mm,
Yeah,
So
that's a hard one.
That's
You're
the first census.
Yeah.
yeah.
So you're up against that there's the Irish records burned. So
Oh yeah.
unless you know where they were in Ireland, then that gets difficult to find the right church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being in
Okay.
the South, that makes it definitely more complicated.
Oh.
But I don't know that the 1700s was really the South. I don't know that they moved that far at that point.
He had come over from Ireland, and It must have been his death date that I have that was before 1790. I think it was like 1771. And he was in Kentucky at that time.
Okay. So just as a little different example, because this one doesn't
Yeah.
sound terribly hopeful for
Yeah.
um, you know, he talked about how you've got the census records where you just have the head of household and then tick marks for the number of people in the household.
Yeah, yeah.
But as you go further back into the 1700s, a lot of times you can find church records or tax rolls or different documents. So if you know where they lived, it's best to go into the library catalog and go search that area and find all of the different kinds of records that are available, because they did a good job documenting people early on. And then there's this gap where it's really hard to find somebody. And then there you get into the point where the census records give you lots of information.
Yeah.
And so if you can bridge that gap, sometimes you can, you know, find some hope.
But you're saying that that in Ireland there were fires in places, and
in the main depository.
Oh, in the main depository.
So if you know the location, the church records are still intact.
Oh, okay.
But you need to know what parish they were in.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
To be able to get to those.
Yeah. Well, there might be a little hope there. I'll look there again. Now, there was a record of, it was a marriage record, but it was of him signing that his daughter he gave consent that she be married to another man. So, I mean, he's established there at a certain date and her marriage is established, but it's still
So
impossible.
yeah, it sounds like you know the spot in Kentucky, or at least a general idea. So do the same thing with the library catalog and search for that county or that town.
Okay.
And see what's available.
Okay, that's a great idea.
And there's a lot of what's on the library catalog that you don't even have to go to the library for anymore, that it's been digitized and you can see it, you know, at home.
Where would I would just search for that in Family Search?
Yes. So it's up under search and it's about the fourth or fifth one down.
Okay.
This library catalog, and you have the choice of searching by name, by locations, by keywords. You know, there's a lot of different things. And so if you look down at the items, when you get to the record that you're looking for, then some of those will say online so that you can actually see them. But most of those records are not indexed. And so you have to do, you know, some sleuthing to find what you're looking for.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's great. I love it.
So where do you get to the census?
So if you're searching, if you just do a general search, it includes the census as part of the search. But you can also go by collection and say, I want to search just a given census or all census records. Like if you just do a general search up here, that's included if you can find it.
And that's for a certain name. You have a name and then you search the records for that name.
Yep. But if you want to do specific census, and there's actually a lot of state census records out there as well.
Oh yeah.
I did those every 5 years thereabouts, so I found information on those as well. You do census.
Okay.
That's great. I've got to get
search just the 1880 census.
Very nice.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit you can search on.
So there's one more piece he didn't touch on. And if you look at a census record for a town, over on the left-hand side, it will take and give you the street name. And then you get the house number in one of those first few boxes. And a little bit on the rural, sometimes if you're lucky, they'll say, you know, we went on this road and we turned right. and we went a quarter mile, you know, which at least you can go back and kind of look at a map for. So that's kind of nice. But the
Yeah.
rural ones, typically it's just house numbers. And I think they're probably just sequential. I don't even know that it really matches up with an actual house.
Yeah, there were no house numbers on that one for my relatives.
But if you get into a town, so we took a class years and years ago where the gentleman had actually gone into San Francisco, got these house numbers, but then when he mapped it out to take and see how, like he was saying, the people who lived close, you
Yeah.
had to pay attention to the center point of where that census taker was on a page, because one day he may have gone right on that road, and on another day he may have gone on the other road that
Oh, gee.
through it, and another day it goes the other direction. But if you pay attention to that and kind of map it out, that actually can be really helpful to still find those adjacent neighbors. So
Wow.
most of us are not, well, I don't know about most of us, but at least in this house, are down in the south where we're not necessarily dealing with cities for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this one does have the street names: Ewing Street, H Street, something.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had one where I had for work where I had the person so it was the brother of the client's grandmother. And we're trying to find her. She had a really unusual name. And in the South, a lot of times they just put it in how they heard it.
Right.
And so, the spelling's all off and everything. But this guy had a common name, and there were two of them, and you couldn't tell which one it was. But by searching the neighbors, because they had been as children given first to an uncle, and then they ended up with a neighbor that took them in because the
Oh,
parents
wow.
died and then the uncle died. Then I was able to narrow it down to which one was the one I was looking for based on the neighbors that had been with that, the neighbors of that guardian. So
That's real detective work. That's amazing.
but those are the true miracles of doing
Yeah.
research and finding what you're looking for. And I don't think that it's something that, oh, I found it. I think it was like I got up in the middle of the night thinking about this, and then it was there. So
Oh,
that
wow.
it was help,
Yeah.
finding
Yeah.
this information. So
Wow.
so if somebody gets you up in the middle of the night, go work on it, because you'll
Yeah.
It's not the first time that somebody's poked one of us out of bed. So
Yeah.
They want to be found.
They can count on you too. That's so great.
All right, well, that will be our last Zoom family history meeting until the fall, probably in
All
October,
right.
as we have the family history fair at the Family Search Center in September. We'll do a class there and then start these back up in October.
Oh, nice. Oh, nice. That sounds great.
That's super.
Well, we'll be able to evaluate and kind of see where we're at and how we can make this more effective, because you do such a great job. We look forward to it every month.
Sure appreciate it, Paul,
Yeah.
Brenda.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I enjoy it.